The avoidant was prepared for every reaction except the one you gave them. They expected anger, tears, desperate attempts to change their mind, emotional confrontations that would justify their need for distance. These responses would have confirmed their narrative that you were too much, that relationships are exhausting, that they made the right choice to pull away. But you did none of those things. You did not fight. You did not plead. You did not try to convince them of your value or debate your worth. You simply acknowledged the situation, gathered your dignity, and left. This quiet departure created a specific type of regret in the avoidant that loud exits never could. A regret rooted not in what was said, but in what was left unsaid, not in drama, but in the deafening power of your silence. The absence of conflict they cannot rationalize. When you left without fighting, you denied the avoidant the conflict they psychologically needed to justify their patterns. They were ready to point to your emotional reaction as evidence that you were unstable, too intense, incapable of handling their need for space. But your calm departure provided no ammunition for these narratives. You did not give them anything to use against you. You did not create drama they could reference as validation for why the relationship had to end. You simply recognized that staying required you to abandon yourself, and you chose differently. This absence of conflict is profoundly destabilizing for the avoidant because it forces them to sit with their own behavior without the distraction of yours. They cannot explain why you left without confronting that their patterns were the problem. They cannot blame your reaction because there was no reaction to blame. The silence leaves them alone with the truth that you walked away not because you were too emotional, but because they were not enough. You demonstrated self-worth they did not expect. The most painful aspect of your silent departure is what it communicated about your self-respect. The avoidant expected you to fight for them, to sacrifice your dignity in an attempt to keep them, to prove through desperation that they mattered more to you than you mattered to yourself. This expectation is rooted in their experience with anxious attachment, where people tolerate anything to avoid abandonment. But you are not anxious. You loved yourself enough to recognize when someone could not meet you where you needed to be met, and you were strong enough to walk away without burning bridges or seeking revenge. This self-respect is foreign to the avoidant's relational experience and deeply threatening to their ego. By leaving without a fight, you showed them that you were not desperate for their attention, that you had options and standards, that your presence in someone's life is a choice rather than a need. The avoidant regrets this because they realize too late that you were not the anxious person they could keep on a string. You were someone of value who simply chose to stop offering that value to someone who could not appreciate it. The silence that echoes louder than words. Your refusal to engage in final arguments, to explain yourself repeatedly, to give them the closure of a dramatic ending, created a silence that haunts the avoidant far more than any confrontation would have. There is no final blow-up to remember and dismiss. There is no angry exchange they can point to as the reason things ended. There is just your quiet exit and the questions it leaves unanswered. Did you leave because you stopped caring, or because you cared about yourself more? Are you angry, hurt, indifferent, or at peace? The ambiguity is torture because the avoidant cannot construct a narrative that protects their ego. They do not know if you are thinking about them or if you have moved on completely. They do not know if the door is permanently closed or if there is still a possibility of reconnection. This uncertainty prevents them from achieving the closure that would allow them to move forward without regret. Your silence keeps them trapped in a loop of wondering, questioning, and slowly realizing that they lost someone who mattered. The regret of losing someone who valued themselves. The avoidance regret is not just about losing you. It is about losing someone who demonstrated qualities they themselves lack. You showed strength in walking away from dysfunction. You showed self-respect in refusing to accept less than you deserved. You showed emotional maturity in leaving without cruelty or pettiness. These are qualities the avoidant struggles to access, and witnessing them in you creates a painful recognition of their own deficits. They regret losing you, not just because of who you were to them, but because of who you revealed yourself to be through how you left. You were someone who could be hurt without becoming cruel, disappointed without seeking revenge, let down without needing to destroy. This grace in departure demonstrates character that is genuinely rare, and the avoidant knows it. They compare every future person to the standard you set, and everyone falls short, not because you are perfect, but because you respected yourself enough to walk away with dignity intact. Why your silence was the ultimate power move. You did not fight back, because fighting would have required you to invest energy in someone who was not investing in you. You left because staying would have required you to abandon your own needs, to shrink yourself, to accept a dynamic that was fundamentally unequal. Your silence was not strategy or manipulation. It was self-preservation dressed as goodbye. And that authenticity is precisely what makes it so powerful. The avoidant can detect when someone is performing indifference or using silence as a tactic. But your silence was real. You genuinely chose your peace over their chaos, your well-being over their patterns, your future over their fear. The avoidant regrets your departure because they finally encountered someone who loved themselves more than they feared being alone, and that encounter revealed how profoundly empty their own patterns have made their life. Your silence taught them what words never could, that walking away is always an option, that tolerating mistreatment is a choice, and that some people value their dignity more than they fear losing someone who could not show up for them.